So here's a little inside baseball on my creative process. When I finish watching an anime, I usually like to think back to all the scenes that really stuck with me. Unfortunately, what came to mind when I was thinking back on Monster Musume was this.
禁足事故ってそんなに大事？
なぜなら私は世界一元気な死体ゾンビーナちゃんだ。誰か見て右から
Ooh, buckle up, we're in for some chop. Monster Musume is a harem show that's tailor-made for you if you're into the idea of banging out with a girl with the lower half of a snake. Or a horse. Or if she's a slime. Or yeah, it's weird. It also really doubles down on the perviness, which initially was kind of nice, but man, I got burned out on that so fast. So here's the pitch. Monsters are starting to integrate into human society, and there are some rules in place to make their transition go smoothly. One of the most important rules is, don't get all up in them guts. And there's a government agent, Mrs. Smith, who's here to make sure that there is no tapping of that big snaky ass. It seems like everybody has their bases covered here. The problem is that Mia, who's a lamia, get it? Har har, is the absolute thirstiest bitch on the face of the planet. Seriously, what part of don't sexually accost your host is such a hurdle? And it's not just Mia, it's the entire cast. I get it, really. When you're trying to write a series like this, you're not looking to write characters, you're looking to write kink bait. But this is amazingly bad. Mia is dangerous, too, because she could conceivably crush a man to death with her tail. Which, incidentally, she almost does in the first 10 minutes of the first episode. I mean, if you gotta go, there are worse ways to go to the hereafter, but shoosh. Well, we're thinking about it. Let's give her a rough estimate of 20 feet long. And give it around 30 pounds per foot of tail. Add in another 50 pounds for her torso, arms, head, and those big stupid cartoon titties of hers. And you're looking at about 700 pounds of critter trying to snog you. For reference, that's like trying to fuck a grand piano. Or alternatively, your mother. Not to mention that it's basically sexual assault every time she's in the same room with this guy. I'm pretty sure he just has a death wish, because he keeps taking on monster girls out of the kindness of his heart. And of course, they all want to ride his completely unimpressive Pinor. Yes, the main character is the winner of this year's biggest pushover award. That's okay, though. It's not like this show is going to win any other awards. One of the biggest problems I've found with Monster Musume is that it doesn't really have a consistent tone. Is it supposed to be some sort of comedy? I mean, it is a harem anime, but it also has some kind of chunk brain social commentary. And let me waylay anyone who says, turn off your brain for it, by offering this as a rebuttal. When you say, turn off your brain, what is it you are actually asking me to do? Is it that you want people to enjoy things without examining them? Because the unexamined life is not worth living, my friend. Or is it that you're worried you'll be confronted by your own shallow taste? It's okay to just say, I want to look at some cartoon boobs this season. I get it. There's a lot of people out there who just want to look at some cartoon boobs this season. But Monster Musume is not the hill you want to die on. Trust me on this. So in spite of knowing full well it's against the law, which is, keeping her in the country and not, voiding out her visa or anything silly like that, she's still incredibly sold on the idea of getting a steamy night of passion out of this poor sucker. And she clearly is not concerned about the word no. It gets worse, though. It turns out Kimihito, I'm sure there's a pun in there somewhere, doesn't even really want to be part of this entire program. Because Miss Smith is so incompetent, she brought Mia to the wrong house. And because he's a decent human being, he decides to take her on anyway. Which really makes Mia's rampant dick lust even creepier. And because he's continually a decent fellow, now Mia has competition from a harpy who looks like she's 12 and acts like she's 5. This is because she's incredibly stupid, which is a plot point for all of 10 seconds, before the story forgets it just as fast as she does. The harpy, who's named Poppy, in a move sure to confuse Latin American viewers who aren't paying very close attention, also wants to get on that. That is, if it comes to her again. Next they meet Centauria, a centaur.
Try harder!
She's a proud warrior race woman. Next. This is where the show gets creepy, though. Sue, the slime girl, is a character that I have to walk very carefully around. She is initially nonverbal, has a childlike body and demeanor, and I think one could be forgiven for thinking that they were trying to turn someone with a mental handicap into kink bait. Poppy is supposed to be funny because she really is dumb as bricks, but she's not borderline mentally retarded, in the clinical and proper sense of the word. Combine this with her unfortunate habit of molesting people when she's dried out, because of course she does, and what little sexiness there was in this show is immediately replaced by creepiness. This show is already not exactly pro-woman, even for a harem show, but now it's getting into the offensive territory. Also, she gets all big and bouncy if she takes on enough water. They already treat boobs like water balloons in this fucking show, so why not go all the way? I wonder if the people who make harem and ecchi anime have ever actually had interactions with women, aside from getting maced or clubbed with purses. The next character has got to be something that's not too offensive, right?
どうも皆様ごきげんよう
Oh goody, it's a woman in a wheelchair. This is Mero, a mermaid who wears a maid outfit. She's also decked out in what pretends to be Gothic Lolita clothing, but according to 42 Believer is just black floof. She's all about the tragic romance business because she's just as emotionally null as the rest of these critters. She and Sadia, which is Centauria's nickname, are the more normal of the cast, even if Mero is a bit into the M side of S&M. And speaking of BDSM, let's talk about Ragnarok. She's a Spider-Woman and not in the red-clad venom-blasting cutie way. Yes, all the undesirable traits you might expect to see in a Spider-Woman short of a full-body carapace and gigantic hairy mandibles are present here. She has 6 eyes, a titanic thorax, and giant segmented legs that are going to be walking through your head all night and not in the good way. She has a very monstrous appearance, beyond the fluffy, cuddly ones that we've seen up to this point. But then for the rest of her, she's just a busty girl who looks like she's sitting on a giant spider. You know what? Fine. Whatever. There are moments where this story actually resembles one that has some resonance. Like when they talk about the fact that people are actually unnerved by these giant creatures wandering around, or that sleazy people would try to take advantage of their relative naivete. But then it shoves that crayon right back up its own nose, and its cognitive functions are voluntarily slowed to a near halt. There are glimmers and hints of some thought being put into this series, but they're only that. Like twinkles of starlight in the night sky, they vanish behind passing clouds of boob jokes and the plot pushing people along. Episode 7 is probably the best one in the series because it doesn't focus on the main harem of bubble-headed idiots. Instead, it focuses on the B Squad. They actually go out and fight other monsters who are causing havoc. These aren't exactly the most developed characters, but they're certainly a lot more interesting than the main cast. There's an Oni, a Djinn, a zombie, and a Cyclops that all have interesting abilities beyond being dangerous to get in the sack with. But, of course, it's right back to business as usual after that. I've heard people try to say that, oh, it knows it's stupid. That's not a good argument. That's up there with turn your brain off. Worse yet, it means that if it knows it's stupid, it's even sleazier, because they could have made something decent out of it and opted not to. It also means that it could have been so much more. And shouldn't you be expecting more? Shouldn't you demand that your entertainment is better than this? Haven't we as a society progressed beyond, this show has the boob? Now I will say that I feel that the anime undersells the characters pretty hard, because I remember not wanting to light it on fire when I read it. This is because the anime doesn't have nearly the same amount of world building that the manga does, in favor of really long, censored boob shots. Because, fuck it, right? But more than that, according to the people on Twitter who I have reason to believe watch way more of this ecchi crap than I do, it's one of the better ones. Apparently the characters are likable compared to other characters in this genre. But when I think of likable characters, I don't think of sexual harassment Naga or any of her cronies. You know what's sad? I can usually dig up one character in a show like this that I really actually like, and here I just can't do it. Seria is just Saber with a horse body. Papi and Sue aren't grown up enough to be attractive or really likable. Mia is passable, but she's grossly taking advantage of Kimihiro's good nature. Mero and Ragnarok have some really big hang-ups, and Miss Smith is so incompetent that she can't be any good at doing anything else either. It's just so obnoxiously written. So much so that I can't imagine anyone is actually having a good time watching this thing. And because it's gotta happen, and because Smith strong-arms Kimihito into it, he ends up having to marry one of them. She may as well just put the gun to his head and pull the trigger herself. Come on! I will say that the animation is pretty solid, even if the characters are flimsy, but as a whole, that won't save a story that's predicated on the same harem crap that we've seen since Love Hina. There really is no salvaging this one for me. You know that complaint that gets leveled against comics that the inmates are running the asylum? This is worse. The fanfic writers are writing manga now. That's what the story beats feel like to me. A bunch of kink characters getting thrown in a blender and then being drizzled on a stack of old story beats. So we get stilted dialogues, plots of convenience, ridiculous anatomy, weird notions of romance, and of course, accidental fisting. So please, let me know if you think this show is brilliant, and I will proceed to pick up a brick and bash myself in the head until I agree with you. Comment as much as you want. I will not run out of bricks. I've had a lot of people tell me, if you don't really dig on a genre, maybe you shouldn't make a review on it. And that's not something that I can do. That's intellectually dishonest to just avoid the things that you don't like if you're in the position that I am. I'm in a very privileged position to be here where there are people who are enjoying watching me and willing to put money towards me continuing to make this show. And so when I get a show like this that comes across my plate and I say, nah, I don't like harems, that's underselling myself, and that's underselling the genre, because it could have changed. There could be something else in that genre that I might really attach myself to. And I've watched harem shows before, and I've found one or two characters in every show that I've been able to be like, hey, yeah, that's cool. Like, that character has some interesting things to it. This one has just the barest, scantest amount of effort put into it. The characters have so little going for them, and yet I still hate every single one of them. With the almost exception of Ragnarok, because she's got just the slightest bit of an edge on all of these characters on the mental side. But other than that, it's the anime equivalent of having a dancing hula girl on your desk and then having 5 more of them. Like, that's the amount of character development that they're really given in this anime. I am led to understand that the manga does go further and does a lot better with them, but clearly they weren't out to make a really good anime adaptation of this.